I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start with a moment of silence. I'd like everyone to remember Jack Smith passing away. Was a county extension agent for 25, 30 years, I believe. Up the public comment portion of our meeting. Anyone from the public wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to administrative business. Mr. LOUGHRY.
I have a couple of things on the administrative business today. First of all, just wanted to update the board on the budget schedule going forward. The clerk and I have met with all the departments individually. We have made the adjustments and gotten back the forms from them that we requested. The clerk's office is putting together budget books for all the commissioners right now. Hope to have those out prior to the end of this week. And then not next week, but the following week, Monday, we will start, I think that's the 14th, we'll start scheduling budget meetings for the commissioners with the individual departments. As some of you may know or may not know, one of our commissioners is out on vacation next week, so we didn't want to schedule them next week. That's why there's the extra week in between. But that still gives us plenty of time to get everything done. And then after the week after we have the meetings with the departments, we will schedule the outside agencies to come in on one day and meet with the board to go over their budget requests. Any questions about that?
Is it going to be necessary to have any budget hearings on any of the special assessments?
You mean the sewer districts?
Yes.
We do not have any proposed rate changes on any of the sewer districts at this time, so there won't be any. Two other items. One is we had a request from the White House if any of the county commissioners would like to go and attend a meeting in the White House with the staff, the president and vice president's staff. I believe there are a few commissioners who have expressed interest in that. I listened in on so did Commissioner Shimke, listened in on a conference call on kind of what it's about. I followed up with a couple of questions via email, and it sounds like it's a pretty good opportunity. I think they said that they generally have about 100 to 130 people, but you do have opportunity to have exchange contact information and get some one-on-one time with the staff members. So, and I think there are a few commissioners who are interested in doing that. Since it's not a budgeted trip, this is the first time the county has ever been invited, to my knowledge. This would need to be a discussion item by the board to authorize the expenditure if they wanted to pay for any of the trip for the commissioners who wanted to go. And I'll leave it at that, and the commissioners who are interested, if they're interested, can talk about it. I looked it up. The full bill for a commissioner to go out there, I think I average like a 3-day stay. By the time you fly out, have your meeting, and then have a chance to come back, is about $1,000 per. That puts you in a motel close enough that it's easy transportation to the meeting. Anything other than that, like I said, the board can discuss. You guys wanted to talk about that now because it is the end of this month.
Well, it's that soon?
Yeah.
Per your recommendation, I went ahead and registered, so, and
Yeah.
if necessary, I can cover my own expense, so it's not.
I went ahead and registered also, so.
Okay.
I would, with two commissioners going, I think that's great representation,
Right.
so I'm happy to abstain, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, somebody needs to go.
Right.
Right, well, that's-
too.
I would go if nobody else would.
Well, looks like it's us.
Okay. So then I would just need the board to approve those expenditures.
I'll entertain a motion to authorize payment for two commissioners to go to White House.
Second?
Make a
I was
motion.
hoping you'd make the motion.
Okay. So moved.
Have a motion to have a second.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? None voting?
Should I abstain or should I?
No, you can vote.
Aye.
Yeah, you're not, it's not a, you can vote on it.
Aye.
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 One last item that Commissioner KAAZ asked me to bring up today is that I know you've all been invited to the Republican Women's Luncheon, and there's question on whether all of you can speak during that meeting, and just so we can be clear on that, I wanted to have that as an item today for the board to discuss on how they wish to handle it. We will notice it as they've been participating in discussions. Just want to be clear up front what the intention is here and that all the commissioners have been asked to speak. So then I just wanted to give you opportunity again to discuss that.
Would that mean that staff would have to be there to take minutes?
Mr. Chairman, members of this commission, I do not wish to be the proverbial wet blanket, but if you were to accept this invitation and more than two of you were present, I believe it would have to, one, be on your agenda as a public meeting. Secondly, since I believe the topic is intended to be county business, it would be appropriate, since your normal practice is to take minutes, that minutes be taken, which I think would require some representation from the county clerk's office for that purpose. I would also, should you accept that invitation, offer this caution that with respect to county business, there are certain topics that you're free to discuss at virtually any time. There are other topics when by state law you sit in a quasi-judicial capacity, and just as justices and judges are not supposed to offer opinions prior to a decision actually being made or evidence or testimony presented, that you steer clear of the rocks of that topic, that I believe the issue you are invited is ostensibly economic development, and that your comments would be limited to that specific topic. I'm concerned that if you stray from that, it could have impact upon future hearings and deliberations by this board.
And are you, like, let's just say, for instance, something was going to.
Well, let's be direct. Planning and zoning issues, it would be
Right,
inappropriate
exactly.
for you to discuss those issues at that time,
Okay.
and would, quite frankly, cause peril to your future deliberations.
So if just one commissioner spoke, gave an update, say per month, would that be acceptable?
I think that's a discretionary call on the part of the board. Commissioners, my only concern is that there'd be an inadvertent action taken where comments made could be misconstrued or could be considered to have been made in a quasi-judicial capacity, which would cause problems in the future.
Okay. Any thoughts?
All that was requested in my dialogue was providing updates, general updates specific to our district. So if there are projects or, items of interest to at least share from our perspective. Again, I think the idea was specific to maybe our districts was the reason we were all invited, but
And Commissioner,
rather than to engage in dialogue. it was
and
more-
Commissioner Shemke, that format would be entirely appropriate. The other consideration would be that this board, to my knowledge, has not sat as a body at any partisan event in the past, or quite frankly, at the invitation of any private group. This meeting would have to be open to the public without charge. I think you would need to make arrangements to have some form of minutes taken. You probably may be in position to accept future invitations from other groups
Sure.
to similarly participate.
If they already record minutes, are those minutes sufficient or no?
Minutes of,
They take meeting minutes?
I think they do take meeting minutes. I would suggest your meetings have to be minutes taken by the county clerk.
Okay.
So, if, let's just say, hypothetically, there were only going to be 3 commissioners present, or 2, does that change your comments?
No. No, my cautionary statement would apply if only one of you went, because in that case, a commissioner might make comments that could be misconstrued as indicating a predetermination of issues that are required to be determined at a later date.
So,
In
but as
regards
far
to
as just
planning.
speaking there on generic issues, that's a different.
Commissioner Shimke referenced, I believe the general topic was economic development aspects with respect to each of the 5 districts. That topic would be appropriate.
So I know I'm not going to be there. I don't know who all was planning to be there.
I've never missed one. I like to go there to eat. And listen.
Commissioners, I would offer comment. The food is pretty good.
It is. It's really good. Everybody needs to go to the Heritage Center for lunch.
It's a reason to become a Republican.
So I have committed to being there for what that, I don't know where everybody else is at, beyond Doug.
Well, I haven't committed, but I'm always there.
I'm usually there. I'm actually the only member, so.
There you go.
I mean, but, you know, I liked the way that we handled, personally, the way that we handled when we were invited to the livestock.
Kansas Livestock.
Kansas
Association.
Livestock, and we had, you know, one of the commissioners just kind of gave an update on, you know, what was happening, you know, across the county in general. And then I think that if we had a majority of the commissioners there, my understanding was that there was going to be an opportunity for specific questions and answers that, you know, if appropriate, the Q&A part, then individual commissioners or whoever was the person who was speaking might provide those answers so that all of us aren't.
Well, basically, we just mingled with the crowd afterwards and
Right.
talked to the individuals on our own. And Commissioner Shimke's the one that gave the talk, so, and that's pretty much left it at that. There was 4 of us there, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
And it was also good food.
It was.
So it will be on the agenda. It is open to the public, so there's anybody that would like to attend can attend, so.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if it turns into a Q&A that we're covered under the open records.
Open meeting.
Open Meetings Act.
If it's noticed on your agenda, if it is open to the public, the Heritage Center is ADA compliant. I believe it would meet the requirements to comply with the Kansas Open Meetings Act.
I'm pretty sure they're not going to just be satisfied with us stating what's going on in our district. I think it's going to turn into a Q&A on several topics.
And Commissioners, again, I would caution you with respect to I'd be happy to meet with you individually should you have questions. But again, there are certain topics where by law you are charged with quasi-judicial duties, and you should quite frankly avoid those topics. There's a time and place that those are to be heard, and this meeting might not be that time or place.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Van Perry? All right. And we'll move on. Consent agendas. Commissioners had a chance to look at the consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Any questions, concerns?
You abstaining?
Yeah, that's fine.
I had a couple just on the check register, just general questions if you could bear with me. Just on the accounting side, the debits and credits associated with Joseph Roth, I don't know enough about who or why, or it just seemed odd to have size of invoice and then the size of return or refund. I just didn't understand how that worked.
Can you give me the specific page you're looking at, Commissioner? Is that
Sure
the
can.
page 4? I believe what you're seeing there is a deposit that we're required, the insurance companies are required to give us when there's damage to a property. Anything that's over, I believe, 50% damage to a property, insurance companies have to give us a check to hold until
Okay.
repairs are made. And so
Okay.
you'll see the check that we make a deposit, and then when they do the repairs, they get the money
Got it.
back. So,
It was page 4, sorry.
So you
Yep.
should see quite a few of them coming in.
Yeah, you'll start to see those for the, you obviously won't see them on the check register until the construction is done, but all the damaged homes down in the south end of the county for the tornado, those insurance companies have already started sending us those checks.
Okay.
It's a statutory requirement, and it's designed so that if the repairs aren't made, the county or a city, municipality has funds to go in and demolish what's remaining and clean it up. That's why that's why the statute requires it.
Okay.
And some of this stuff on the check registry would also, some of this is going to be reimbursed by FEMA. If you look at page 6, there was a pretty sizable number for chainsaw.
We will be submitting all of the associated expenses
Okay.
to FEMA. It was approved by the
But
federal
that
government
would
as
be
a
an allowable
federal disaster.
expense.
Those should be allowable expenses, and we will submit all those. And then we will continue to have some that we're tracking as we finish cleaning up all the stuff that was hauled to the quarry, and we transfer it over to a landfill. Those expenses are also reimbursable, so we'll track that too.
I'm assuming that was the case because there was another for the landfill itself that looked like an anomaly, and I'm assuming most of that was associated with the storm and obviously would be a reimbursable.
If it's storm-related, it
Right.
would be reimbursable, yes, sir.
Then I just had 2 quick other ones that were specific to our board. There was one where, what's the expense related to minutes? Like, what is there were 2 different charges. I can give you the page, hold on. I'll start sharing the page numbers. Page 10. This is minutes, Equinox, and I thought that was. It's to the state, which I just wanted to better understand what it was. I'm sure the state has our best interest at heart, so.
You say it's page 10?
Page 10, yes, sir.
State of
It's-
Kansas.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, those are purchases of vehicles off the state contract. So one was they're both Equinoxes, actually.
So it's a vehicle.
And-
Vehicle.
Yeah, those are vehicles, and it was basically,
Per
the note,
ordinance.
the note is that it was the state of Kansas, but it's a purchase off the state contract.
Okay,
So we're not paying the state of Kansas, we're buying vehicles off the state contract.
got it. And then the last one that I had on us was just office space. So this is like associated with the build out for what we did over here? It's like an $8,000 charge for just an office space. Anytime I see Board of County Commissioners, I feel like I'm definitely responsible for that charge.
Yeah,
Also, Raleigh's charge.
Understood.
that should be the final payment, I believe, for that
Okay.
construction.
I just thought that was a while ago, so I was confused. Okay.
Yeah, I think they held off billing us until they got your door on.
Retainage or something. All right, fair enough.
Question on the FEMA, you said that could take up to 24 months.
Yes.
So as far as.
18 months is the optimistic, 24 months is the realistic.
So for what you're considering for fiscal year where you're going to plug that in, you're probably 21?
Yeah, we're not anticipating any reimbursement in 20. It would be 21 before we get any reimbursement for these expenses. So the money's coming, and it's also, understand, it's not 100% reimbursement. It's only 75%. So 25% of that is related to county expenditures that we will not get reimbursed for.
State will also give,
State has a portion that, since they declared it
Sounds
as
like we-
disaster
we're
too,
85, right?
they'll give some as well, but they're probably not as free with what they label as needed expenses as the federal government is. But we'll submit it all, and hopefully we'll get a positive outcome. But there is still an expense related to the county.
any other questions on the consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I would, before you make that, just make sure that you understand that on the second page, there actually is one other item that is still on the consent agenda. It's just, as you're looking at your main agenda, it has our normal A, B, C, D, E, but there is a
Right.
F that's
Linwood
also
plat.
on the consent agenda.
Linwood plat.
Yeah, the Linwood plat. I just want to make sure you all saw that. I know in the past that sometimes we miss that.
Make a motion, we approve consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? None? Voting?
Aye.
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 Weren't you going to abstain?
Oh, excuse me, I abstain. I was looking at I was thinking about
Back it.
the added,
Yeah.
Sorry.
sorry, I abstain.
All right. Go then. All right, are we ready for Megan?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
A couple months ago, I was in front of you and we had all of our grants were signed and approved by the board. The state of Kansas has provided us our allotment letters. All of those grants have been approved with a revision of the behavioral health grant. We have a reduction from the $25,000 that was originally requested, and we were approved for $4,700. So we have provided a revised budget of what that kind of looks like and some of the reductions of services that we would be able to provide to our offenders, but still be able to provide services to our offenders. So I would just need approval that I can resubmit this revised budget to the state.
Any questions of Megan on this?
Megan, I guess I'm just better understanding what that, $20,000+ variance is going to mean. I mean, it's obviously a negative impact to your department, so.
Well, this grant is ultimately kind of what I like to consider, I don't want to say play money, but it's extra money. So we already allot in our grant and in our original budget through the comp plan services to be offered to offenders. This grant is specifically to address behavioral health needs. So we would be able to pay for more assistance with mental health services, substance abuse services, which would be co-pays, assessments. So it will be a reduction in services that we would be able to provide to our offenders. However, we still will be able to provide those numbers to our offenders. Part of the reason is that we had a really hard time getting an in-house program set up within our agency because we just could not find that right one until we got that MRT program or that moral recognition therapy training. So we are officially running that program now in our agency. We have 2 groups going. So I'm hoping that maybe for future years we can show like we got this up and going. We can maybe start asking for that $20,000 to help fund some of those programs as well. But we still will be able to offer services to our offenders. The biggest reduction will be is that we would, with the original application, we asked for some allowance to be able to pay for like first month's rent to Oxford houses for our offenders. So once they complete inpatient treatment, usually the recommendation is that they relocate into an Oxford house or a sober living house. We did take that out of our proposal just because that was one of those problems that we've seen over the past, but we're focusing more on the things that we do every day.
Okay. Who makes the decision to make this reduction?
The state of Kansas and the governor.
So it's in the budget office?
Yes.
Okay.
How much have you received in the past, Megan?
This grant has been proposed since 2012. We've received anywhere between $5,000 to $2,000. In the past 2 years, we've received close to like $45,000 or $50,000. But that was because we were allocating some of those funds to pay for staff costs because we had the reduction in overall overhead of our agency because we removed city-county probation off of the expenses through our agency. So there was some little bit of overhead that had to be covered, and we were able to cover that under this grant through the opportunity to facilitate programs in our office. So this is going to now focus more on being able to provide co-pay assistance to offenders in the community, not necessarily cover staff salaries.
So when they send you a reduction like that, do they send a letter of explanation or do they just
And that's ultimately what they said, is that, you're not covering staff salaries this year like you have in the past. We're focusing on the true need to provide services to the offender, which you allocated under your original budget, that staff salaries are going to be covered under here, so.
Any other questions, Megan? And I'll entertain a motion to authorize the chairman to sign behavioral health grant funds.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, voting?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
I didn't mark on this one. So. Okay, we good? I couldn't tell. I thought they were both in blue. All right, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Megan. We're ready for adoption of policies regarding open records and drug screening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I've provided to you two RBAs, the first of which is on your agenda for the purpose of a revised Kansas Open Records Act policy. I've submitted the proposed policy to you. There are several changes. As noted in the alternative section of the RBA, currently the county does not have a policy with respect to charges for providing electronic copies of records. The county also has been charging $15 per hour for staff time. You are allowed by law to recoup the actual expenses. I have visited with a state agency's open records policy and modeled this proposed policy off of that office's policy. It reflects the actual cost to the taxpayer of having staff time and the cost of reproduction of records with respect to this. I would ask that you note in the policy under fee section, which is the second page of the policy, that there is a one-time record request for citizens or any party, quite frankly, within a 12-month period when the request would produce not more than 25 pages of records or take more than 1 hour of staff time, that each requesting party would be given that. I think that's as a courtesy. I'm not certain if you're aware, but currently the county does try to act beyond their minimum requirements of the Kansas Open Records Act with respect to citizen requests for records. We do get those on a regular basis, and generally they're responded to as a courtesy. However, I believe this policy does reflect what is allowable under state law, and as pointed out, the goal is really to compensate the taxpayer for time that is required to respond to a request that goes above and beyond the 25 pages or 1 hour of staff time.
Basically, every citizen gets a free one.
You get one bite,
Okay, kind of like a transfer station.
kind of like a dog.
We don't need that anymore, do we?
Any questions on this?
Dave, I didn't get a chance to ask the four biggest users of this probably would be.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I couldn't hear your question.
I didn't get a chance to ask, probably the four biggest users that this would affect is registered deeds, clerk, appraiser, and planning and zoning. Have you talked to all four of those? Are they okay with it?
I'm not certain which agency gets the highest volume of requests. Generally, the ones that have crossed my desk don't deal with the appraiser or register of deeds.
Okay. I didn't know.
Since they maintain records as an ordinary course of business, a request to the Office of the Register of Deeds or the County Appraiser's Office is generally not going to be under a Kansas Open Records Act. That's just their normal course of business, is to provide that record.
Okay.
What is the status quo? What's the change that you're making, basically? What's the current status quo, the procedure you're following right now?
In the RBA that's been provided under the alternatives section, it's listed at maintain current policy of $15 per hour for staff time, 25 cents per page for paper copies, no charge for electronic copies, and no specified policy on if parties request or would require FedEx or Air Express deliveries.
Okay, and what's the rationale for making the change?
I think it, quite frankly, at $15 an hour, certain requests require participation by your staff who are compensated well in excess of $15 per hour. And those are costs to the taxpayer, and they can be recouped from the requesting party.
And you modeled this after the Attorney General's?
Yes.
Was the last policy we made the fee schedule on this was probably 20 years ago? I'm guessing.
It's time to revisit the policy, I believe, Commissioner.
Any further discussion on the open records policy? You want to discuss the drug testing policy at the same time, or do they have to be separate motions?
You can approve those separately.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the updated open records policy.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the open records policy? Voting?
Aye.
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 Move on to the drug screening.
Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I've provided an RBA with respect to revisions that are being proposed to the county's drug and alcohol screening policy. The significant changes are that blanket post-offer testing will no longer take place. Potential employees who have been tendered an offer of employment with respect to what I refer to as safety-sensitive positions, and those are generally going to be in the office of EMS, the sheriff's office, or public works, or other individuals who are required to have a CDL license. Those would continue to have drug and alcohol screening as a condition of employment. And it also deals with how post-accident testing is conducted. The prior policy was, quite frankly, did not provide specific guidance to your supervisors, managers, and elected officials, and it led to situations where, quite frankly, we were doing unnecessary testing, which would require not only the employee who was going to be tested, but also a supervisor to often spend 4 or more hours for incidents that were, quite frankly, of de minimis nature. What we've tried to do is, in the accident policy that's listed, require testing in instances that truly do put either the public or the county at some questionable risk as to whether an impairment was involved. Now, the testing does provide testing and screening for alcohol or drug impairment on a for-cause basis. And the supervisors, if they observe impairment, can require screening and testing. It also specifies that the testing be done in 2 stages, that there be a preliminary test, which can be done quickly at our own health department, and if that preliminary test is not deemed sufficient, then additional testing via laboratory can be conducted. And that's the one that takes time and is expensive. I can't give you the exact cost, but there is and it is not inconsequential cost involved in having that testing. So I've reviewed this with your staff, county administrator. We believe, and quite a bit of work has gone into this, and I want to commend staff for the time that they've put in on this. We believe this will properly protect the county and the public from drug or alcohol impairment, accidents caused by that, as well as streamlining the process so that unnecessary expenses in time and laboratory costs are avoided.
So right now, it's just going to be CDL drivers?
CDL are safety sensitive, and that would, I'm just stating basically, would generally be EMS employees and or sheriff's office employees.
David, did we estimate, I mean, again, what the savings would be? So whatever the frequency of the test currently versus what we would expect going forward?
Commissioner Shimke, I've not conducted a quantitative analysis as to what the actual cost is. I can tell you anecdotally that, particularly in public works, if an employee damages a piece of equipment with another equipment, the current policy is requiring that that employee go for laboratory testing and that employee be accompanied for that testing by a supervisor. So they may both go down to the laboratory for testing, sit there generally for a minimum 4 hours.
Right.
To and from, sometimes more, and that's 8 hours of time that's out the window.
Time, travel. I
Yes.
was just thinking about the laboratory costs in general. If there's a figurative number that's $300 or
I think it's more than that, Commissioner. I could find out for you, though. As I said, it's the time.
Sure.
We're trying to avoid unnecessary expense and delay and inconvenience while offering that protection, level of protection to both the county, the public, and the employee.
Under current policy and under this policy, we don't do random testing.
Random testing is allowed in very limited circumstances. You are a governmental entity, and the U.S. Constitution prohibits you from conducting unreasonable searches and seizures, and a drug test is considered a search and seizure. So generally, you have to have cause or compelling public interest to conduct that. Random testing would be limited to that group of safety-sensitive employees that I earlier referenced. No, we do not do random, and random testing, quite frankly, would not be considered proper.
Okay. Well, coming from the industry I come from, it's very,
Commissioner
very
Stieben,
common.
yeah, this wouldn't let any of your fellow employees off the hook.
Any questions on the policy? I just figured that anybody that drove a county vehicle would be subject to it myself.
It's just a CDL issue. And I mean, you know, when you have the reasonable suspicion type thing, you know, as supervisor discretion, you know, even if we're saying, let's say one of our public works employees, you know, backs up and happens to scrape a pillar. I'm just saying, you know, happens to scrape a pillar. Well, that can happen to not any driver, because, you know, some are better than others, but that can happen to me. And so that doesn't, I'm not necessarily impaired, and there's no reason for me to have to go take a test like this because after something like that.
Drug test costs more than the damage.
Right, when the drug test costs more than the damage, and the supervisor's there and clearly understands that this person is not impaired, then, you know, you just chalk that up to the cost of doing business. But if they look over and this employee is kind of stumbling around, they can say, you know, we need to go have this done. So I think that we're saving the county unnecessary expenses, and at the same time, we're allowing our employees, staff, and
Drug-free
you know.
environment.
I think one thing to point out is all staff would be susceptible to testing under the
Right.
same conditions, whether they're CDL or safety sensitive. The pre-screening would be the CDL or the safety sensitive positions. And the, I don't want to call it necessarily in-house screening, but the screening that we would do at the health office would be for the other employees who aren't CDL or safety sensitive, because
Okay.
they have to get a specific test. So
Okay.
that, it doesn't exclude anybody from testing. Everybody would be susceptible to the same testing. It's just where they go for the testing
Oh,
is some
okay.
of this.
Right.
Okay. Any more discussion? Questions? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the updated drug and alcohol policy.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on the drug and alcohol testing policy?
I'll just say one thing, like compared to where on the railroad, the testing, when you know there's going to be testing, when employees know there's going to be testing, it affects behavior. And there's been a dramatic change in the railroad industry from the early 70s to now, compared, now that they do random drug testing, because it's just absolutely not tolerated.
But the railroad
You know.
can do that because it's a private industry.
Right, that's correct. I'm not saying that we would do it and we know we're complying with the law,
Right.
but I'm just saying, having these policies is a very good thing, I think, because it does let people know, you know. And I will say this for the railroad, if you are caught, the first time they send you to rehab, and they pay for it as well. And then
As it should be, I mean, in
and-
my opinion.
Should have.
And then, but if you do it again, So you get one chance.
So if we could just get a cell phone policy like that.
Yeah.
Texting policy. Anyway, any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we're ready for planning and zoning.
Before they start, can I ask you a question? Sure. When you guys have an open meetings request in your office, how do you typically handle that? Is the person making the request, you take them back to the table and sit them down to look at the material, or do you just have them sit up front to look at the material, or how is that handled?
They're supposed to file with the clerk's office first, so that's what we do. We give that information to the clerk, and then when it comes back, we have 3 days to respond.
Okay.
So, and then sometimes we set up meetings with them and help them with looking through all the documents.
Okay. But do you typically let them sit at a table in the back, or do you have them sit at the table up
Yeah,
front?
we have a chair like up front that they can sit and go
Just
through the
at
documents.
just at the desk, just
counter.
the entrance? That's where you typically do it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Morning.
This is case number DEV 19061. This is a request for a final plat, approval of a final plat for Pride Estates and 9-lot subdivision. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this. They did amend one staff recommendation for conditions from building the road to just protecting the road with a no-build zone at the end of that cul-de-sac. That is the only change. The applicant is here and will answer any questions that you may have. This is not a public hearing item, and there is not a resolution.
Okay. The street lights, Lansing is okay with not having the street lights, correct?
That's based on our regulations. It says that street lights are required, and staff is not, we cannot override that requirement, so the board can waive that requirement if need be.
Well, if street lights were installed, once they're installed, who pays the maintenance and electric and all that? The county?
It's usually in the covenants and restrictions within the subdivision, paid for by the developer or...
Well, but at the initial cost, but after, to operate the street lights and to maintenance of the street lights and electricity.
Again, it's included with the covenants and restrictions within the subdivision. It's like a homeowners association.
But if they don't have a homeowners association, the taxpayer's got to pay it, correct?
It depends on the agreement that's being done.
Okay. Well, this one doesn't have a homeowners association.
Right.
So
So the
it would be
taxpayers would be
taxpayers. Yes.
Do we have typically out in the county, have we required streetlights?
If it's a subdivision, it's required within the regulations. So
If there's
staff
any
cannot
street-
waive the requirement. It's up to the board to grant a waiver.
If there's a new street put in, right?
Right.
Only if there's a new street.
Only within subdivisions.
Yeah.
And within subdivisions that are located within a
Right.
certain distance of the city.
The reason this is a requirement, and you may not see it on all applications, is because the classification of this particular subdivision, the location next to a city and the density, that's why you don't see them on a lot of them, but you do see it on this one, is the classification.
And it's probably been over 10 years since we've put in a county subdivision that's added a new street. So all the ones that don't have new streets aren't required to put streetlights in.
I wonder how much, you were talking about taxpayers paying, I wonder how much that runs the taxpayer to pay that every year.
Should be electric bill every month.
I mean, but yearly, I wonder what the cost would be
Well,
yearly.
What about maintenance?
You know what, do we have any idea what that would be yearly to charge the taxpayer?
No, sir.
We don't have any so far. There's no rural subdivisions that have streetlights.
But we have no idea what cost we're taking on for that, if we do If we do.
We don't take it on, we do. Zero.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I mean, that's the problem with I mean, if it was like Bear Lake or a private, well, let me ask you that. If we had a development out in the county, because we're talking about getting away from, like, if they're out in the county, we're talking about asking them to pay for their roads, and can we also ask them to pay for their streetlights and the maintenance of that in the future, like a Bear, I don't know, is Bear Lake, their streetlights, are they paid for?
That's a planned unit development, so we have conditions as part of that development, so they have to pay for all that. There is a homeowners association.
So they're paying for their own streetlights in that development, and that's kind of what we've been talking about, moving towards that, if it's not in the urban area of the county. But in this case, just looking at the expense.
Well, it's in the urban growth area, so eventually, I mean, Lansing would be paying for it, right? I mean, obviously.
Only once they annex it,
Right,
If-
right.
yeah.
I don't like the streetlights.
Yeah,
Not out here.
I was gonna exclude the streetlights and sidewalks.
Okay. Would anybody else have any questions?
Well, then we're still not trying to follow through with what we're trying to do to make sure that as growth begins to move out into the county, you know.
Well, but they've
into those
notified
growth
Lansing
areas.
now, and Lansing was okay with
Right.
the no sidewalks or streetlights.
Where would on the sidewalk issue, where would the sidewalks go, or would they serve any kind of a purpose? I mean, you guys that are doing this development,
Maintenance,
I mean, would people use those sidewalks?
no.
So we're building sidewalks that nobody's gonna use? And
Well, not
we're
building
requiring it?
sidewalks, though.
Well-
They didn't require it.
That wasn't required, it wasn't
wasn't
Well,
required.
required.
but if we did,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be used.
Well, sidewalks were in the plan until it went to the planning board, right?
Yeah, they granted a waiver, they're
And
recommending
then the
that.
planning board did away with the sidewalk.
Right, so, but
Streetlights are still on the table.
Right.
I mean, I think this is what we're talking about in the macro sense, when we're starting to get to how we want the developments to come
Right.
in. That we don't just want to have these artificial requirements, we want to have a policy of what it's going to be.
Right. I
Every
agree.
time.
Every time. And I think one of the things that when I was reading through the packet is that for EMS and, I mean, like for safety reasons, it seemed that there was the request that the lights be placed. That was my understanding by whatever, am I incorrect? That was EMS
That's correct, I mean, it's for
Recommendation.
safety reasons.
for safety reasons and fire protection? I'm just saying, that was my understanding as I read that, so, you know, not having that requirement is also not adhering to the recommendations of that part of
Did
our
the
staff.
developer ask for a waiver on the streetlights?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Herring, this is yours.
Yes.
Got any comments?
Sure, I did. Joe Herring, Herring Surveying, 315 North Fifth Street.
Yeah.
Good morning, Commissioners. We'll start off with the streetlights since we're talking about them. Of course, we're asking for a waiver. There's not one subdivision that has them, maybe Bear Lake, but that's a PUD. I don't even know if there's a design standard or a number that's required by the county, if they have that standard out there, or how it goes, and that's for safety. That's the first time I've heard of it being for safety.
That's what they said.
Maybe I misread it, but if that's the case, and we have a lot of homes out there that need streetlights because there's not a county road with a street light, or homes out there that don't have the light, so I think if we start pushing that envelope,
I got one.
you have
But I don't ask the
streetlights.
taxpayers to pay for it.
And that was then, and this is
Pay for
now.
it yourself, yeah.
Is this gonna have an HOA? I didn't see one.
No.
Okay.
It is not going to have an HOA. And after the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, our last meeting, some neighboring families were here. The Kraft family was here, who have owned the neighboring property for 5 generations, as long as a couple in the southern portion. And they were questioning the protection area. And I think that they were not in favor of those being in place, just due to the fact that now the county can purchase that right away and build the road through their property, and they were not in favor. I think maybe somebody reached out to the board. The argument, or not the argument, the discussion on it was that it's policy that the local roads protect the future extension of the road. It's close to the half-mile line. I understand that. There's also a road directly south of it, of this project, that's close to the half-mile line that could go through less floodplain and connect to Country View subdivision, which already extends out onto 147th Street. Or there's Brant Road to the north, and I have a drawing of that. We never got to that discussion in the Planning Commission, because at that time, the commission had taken the direction that we're going to enforce policy, and that is to protect the area. After having that discussion and hearing the neighbors not want them in place, we're asking that you to consider waiving the protection areas off the face of the plat and just let this be a standalone cul-de-sac where it won't extend into a floodplain to the east. And you still have the ability to protect the road and build a road east and west to the south or to the north of this project. It does not stop development. And I have that drawing if you would like to see it.
And the email we got yesterday from the Kraft family, that's a platted subdivision already?
Yes.
Been platted a long time?
Couple of years.
2014, 2015.
Oh, 2000. Okay, so it is platted.
It's platted, it's two lots, it's two large lots, or three actually.
So if this happens, that would have to be replatted?
No. The only time the protection zones, the no-build zones are there if another development happens. So they have to tie together. So let's say they decided to further subdivide that property. Then they would have to put in the new regulation, which is a no-build zone for if that road connects. If they developed it, then there would have to be a connecting road versus just a dead-end cul-de-sac. Same way with the property, I think it would be back to the east. My direction's right on that?
Yeah.
So that there's a road already back going west that's a through road that lines up with the entrance to this cul-de-sac that you're proposing. If the property on the other side back to the east would develop, what we're asking is just to protect a no-build zone so that that street could be put in the future. We're not taking property, we're asking for a no-build zone so that if that happens, the city, if it's in the city at that time, or the county, has the ability to acquire the right-of-way through whatever process we have without having to require somebody move their home or take a home. That's all that's for. Unless those developments happen, nothing would happen on the property from the email that you received yesterday or on the property back to the east. Unless they further subdivide, the road won't happen. That's the whole point of not building the road now.
And I think they're good with that if they're the reason to cause that road to be built, but it was our understanding and through the Planning Commission meeting that the county or the city could acquire that right of way and build that road.
That's true of any piece of property, and
condemnation.
that's true of any piece of property in any city, in any state, in any county.
Right, so without
It's
the
called
no-build
eminent
zone there,
domain.
they're kind of protecting their property is what they were, and it's floodplain to the east.
Either,
We beat that concept enough in discussion, but it's just the likelihood of that road ever going through. The neighbors didn't like the no-build zone. And I believe they sent the letter up here, and I'm just addressing it. They would like to see them removed so they protect their interest. And not to get into all the other discussion that has taken place prior to, we've agreed on the cul-de-sac layout as submitted.
Commissioners have any questions, Mr. Herring?
On the no-build zone itself, proposing a 60-foot wide no-build zone, if that were ever to become a street, is it 105 feet setback from the front?
It's 40 feet inside the subdivisions. It's 40 feet.
Okay.
It's not a section line road.
Okay, so that's included, right? So that if this street was to become a right-of-way,
I believe so.
physically put in,
It's not included, it'll be outside of that.
okay. What I'm getting at is if they were to put this street in eventually and somebody was to build a house right up against that no-build zone, would they still be in compliance with the setback rule? Say they wanted to build right up against the no-build zone line.
No, they wouldn't.
Would they be encroaching then?
Yeah,
the
they'll be
front?
encroaching the setback, yes.
So what I'm saying is, I think this needs to be, you need to add the front.
I don't have the
setback.
plat in front of me, and
It looks like it's wider though. I don't have a
It's
scale.
wider than 60 feet.
It is.
It's 60 feet both sides. I believe.
Yeah. So my only question is, if they put the street in and somebody builds a house right up against the no-build zone, then are they gonna be encroaching in the no-build?
Yeah, it should be
front
120 feet
setback?
wide is what the.
It should be.
No, you're right, it is. It's 60
120.
feet on either
So they would
side.
not be encroaching.
Okay,
Yeah, then it should be fine.
okay, that's all I wanted to check, was make sure we've included the front setback, because it won't be a side setback anymore, which is less. It would meet the front
That's
setback.
correct. If they
Okay.
did develop through, that road did go through,
Okay,
it would be the front yard setback.
okay.
When I didn't see any response to the email we received, but they were questioning some of the dimensions in the email, right? Specific to,
correct.
that's what I have a bigger issue
Some of the
with, is
measurements.
understanding the discrepancy
Are
between.
you talking about the quarter mile?
Right, right.
Yeah, well, I think what they're referring to is it doesn't line up exactly on a half mile or quarter mile grid line.
Right.
But a lot of through streets, quarter mile and a half mile, aren't exactly on the line. It actually is more aesthetically pleasing to people if your road meanders a little bit.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that this road lines up on a quarter mile, it means it would be connected to a quarter mile road.
Also, in this case, it matches another street on the west side, so it lines up with another street on the west side.
I think the crafts were questioning the no build zone going north out of our cul-de-sac.
They
That
wanted it
It's
to.
not 1320. Well, the 1320 is a guideline rule.
Right.
I mean, if we held that stringent at 1320, 2640, then this road that they're building east doesn't line up on the section line either, so a lot of that discussion would have went away. So it's just a guideline that's where they want to place it.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure that us using it as a guideline or a road meandering wasn't negatively impacting this family and their property, so.
Yeah.
Being they already went through the planning process.
Yeah, and the other thing they brought up was the East Road has
The one that goes through the floodplain.
a
Right.
ditch, and I looked at the topo map, and it only drops like 20 feet.
But it is floodplain.
Yeah,
And
but,
that always, if you can avoid floodplain, you avoid it.
yeah,
And there's possibility to avoid floodplain in
When-
the situation.
And there are governmental entities that take care of the
Right.
floodplain aspect. I've
Exactly.
unfortunately
That's
done
not
more
us.
research than I care to in that regard.
Have to get permits to work in it.
but there's no requirement for roads to be built out of the floodplain. I mean,
No, I mean, you can build roads through the floodplain, just typically you try to design around it.
We have Stranger Creek, we have roads going.
Yeah, those roads have been there a while.
Yeah.
Actually building a new bridge in the floodplain.
Yep.
Jeff, going back to the streetlight conversation, would I be, maybe this is more for staff, correct in assuming, I mean, a streetlight's something that's fairly easy to add after the fact versus other types of utilities and infrastructure where it's not easy. I mean, you're going through a road, there's some real challenges. My point with that being is, rather than making this one the first of its kind, knowing how easy they are to add at a later date, if indeed it does become into that growth management or a policy or requirement, they could easily be added after the fact. I think if the developer's asking to have that removed, making them.
So it doesn't exist currently as a policy?
Something we need to address.
It does exist as a
And-
policy because of the location of the
Right.
subdivision. I do think when we reached out to the city, they didn't ask for any of that to be protected. The reason we have it as a policy in our guidelines is to protect the city's future growth. If the city didn't care to protect it, then I don't know
I think it needs to be
why
in
the
our next
county
work session on.
would be.
Yeah, I think it's still
Policy.
something we need to
Well,
to bring
especially if
up.
it's at our expense.
Right, and, as we're working toward developing policy or enforcing policy, somebody's going to be a first. I mean, it doesn't matter, I mean, at
That's
some
true.
point, somebody's going to be a first, there always has to be. And, we need to stop the attitude that says, well, we never did this way before. We can't live in the past, we have to look at moving forward from this point forward, how do we want to see things develop and progress? And even in the urban growth areas, and so, I have no problem with, if the rest of the board doesn't feel that this particular development should not be the first, but we have to remember that somebody's going to be the first, and somebody's not going to be happy with being the first,
Exactly true.
and whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it does make life easier for emergency responders if they have the ability to be able to see where they're going, over to the, areas. I know, I go down 20th Street, when the street lights are out, it's dark, but when they're on, you can really kind of have an idea of what's going on to the east or west of you. So I'm just saying, we need to stop the thing that says we've never done it before this way, so
And I
this is,
And I agree with what you're saying, Commissioner KAAZ, and I don't have a problem making somebody the first, but I think this particular thing we're talking about needs to be addressed.
Right.
Instead of overriding the rules, I think we need to make this a work session item and talk about, do we really want to require streetlights?
Right.
Because if there's
I
no
just-
HOA, then everybody in this room
right, and then we
is
have
going
to
be
pay
paying
for it,
In
right. That's what I said,
Situate and
that's,
Easton will be flipping the bill.
Yeah,
right, and
exactly.
I agree that we need to figure out,
I think this goes back to some of the discussion we've had about subdivisions in close to cities versus subdivisions outside. And that's why this is the Class 2, am I right? It's Class B
Right.
subdivision, which requires these things because it's in close. Well, if the cities had control over their growth area, it'd be up to them to make those decisions, and then it'd be on them, if they made those decisions, it'd be on their dime instead of the counties. And that may be the conversation that we need to have is who controls that growth?
But we did ask for their input.
And
We did.
Lansing did respond.
Right.
Yes.
If we require streetlights, can we also require the subdivision, in the absence of a homeowners association, could we require that the residents maintain and pay for those streetlights? Could that be a provision?
I don't think
Well, I
so.
don't see how.
I
Is that
think
something that could be required?
Correct.
I think we could do that, but then the application of it would be fairly difficult, given every time the property sells, you have a new person that you have to educate on what the bill is.
You just have to that would
You'd
be
have to-
part of the
You
transfer.
have to create a benefit district.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to create a light benefit district, which means everybody in that subdivision would get a special assessment on their
That's the only way to
taxes.
handle it for the life benefit district.
That would be
That is the most practical way. After that, it gets problematic.
Because I know when we lived here in Leavenworth, we had a street light that was on the alleyway, but when they transferred the property, it had to be transferred. It was part of the
Right.
part of the property transfer.
It was a private light that
Right.
they put in, and so you had to take.
But it was the responsibility of the property
Homeowner, right.
owner.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility that the taxpayer, that it could be written up in such a way the taxpayer would not have to be on the hook.
But not in this instance, because that's not,
Well, it
It's not
could be
part
in
of
this
it.
instance. We would have to create a benefit district for all the houses to share in the cost of the streetlights, instead of just the property that it happened to sit on.
I kind of agree with Commissioner Shemke that, this can be done at a later date, but
Right. If
I'm just-
Lansing does come out and annex, and require streetlights, it's not a big deal to add it then.
I was just
Can they-
asking as a general inquiry, if we could get the taxpayers off the hook. That sounds like we could.
By not putting them in, we already did.
Right.
any comment from our counselor?
Well, Commissioners, I would just offer this observation. You can remove the requirement that the streetlights not be paid by the general taxpayer by creating a series of benefit districts. There will be a cost to administer those various benefit districts, and if there was a separate benefit district for each subdivision, the administration of dozens, if not hundreds, of separate benefit districts becomes substantial. And then you get the question of consistency. What if the people in one benefit district, for whatever reason, don't pay? Do you turn the lights off in that subdivision? And so you have lights, no lights, lights, the broken tooth scenario? Or is this something really that is best handled by a municipality after annexation, where a uniform policy can be applied? And that's just my observation.
Yep,
I think we should take the lights out.
I do too. Any other
So as far as
questions?
requests, what does that leave then? Just the,
The no
No
build
build.
zones. Any
I
thoughts?
personally don't don't like that classification at the request of the landowners, only because when we are trying to forecast 10, 20, 30 years in the future, I've been unimpressed with our ability to deliver on that forecasting. So I don't support it. But.
Any thoughts? Any
Well-
questions of Mr. Herring?
I don't necessarily, I think that ending the full sec, but the no-build zone, I don't think is necessarily a bad idea. I think that, especially given where this specific subdivision is located, and it is very close to the city of Lansing, that as their growth occurs, then I think that we hold some responsibility to make sure that the development that might occur within that area is uniform and can be
Right, but under the
accomplished.
existing policy and process, if they do choose to try to develop, it's going to go through the exact same planning and zoning with, because of the location. We're going to get comments and engagement from the city of Lansing, so it's not as though we're green lighting any and all developments.
No.
Right.
Well, I think we have a policy in place that was just adopted actually last year, which is the access management policy. That's what this is kind of falling
Right.
under, which is to protect the areas that future roads should go through if development occurs. And it's not to discourage development, but to prevent having to acquire homes when the roads go through in the future or structures.
Right.
We understand we'll have to pay for the right-of-way when the time comes, if the time comes. We just don't want to have to pay for a house. Short of that, we have policies and procedures that a lot of people would prefer not have to follow at all, such as speed limits and no parking areas.
I don't know why you're looking at me, Mark.
So there's always going to be something that we don't agree with, I guess is the point. And at some point in time, either we are protecting future growth, this is the least obtrusive. In the past, we actually required the dedication of the right-of-way, which took the land, and we're not doing that anymore. We're just protecting it for future growth. If no growth happens, there's no issue. If growth happens, then we are able to go in and put the road in without buying a house or making somebody move because we've taken their house. It's more to protect the people who are buying those lots and building their homes there so that they understand, hey, in the future, this could be where the road goes. If you build in this area, you're moving, or you're building a house on the same lot further back, and we just are trying to avoid that. And, I mean, it happens when we acquire right-of-way on a regular basis. We had it on Eisenhower. We had to acquire a home. They'd been there long before we ever contemplated having a 4-lane road out there. In this case, we're just contemplating normal surface streets that will occur eventually. And if they don't, they're not out anything. They still have the property. They just can't build in that area. Can't
No.
build a home in that area.
That's the way I look at it. It
Right.
doesn't cost us anything,
No, and it doesn't
and
take anything from the home or the developer of the home,
yeah, potentially
property
saves
owner.
us money down the road, and it leaves us options. So
Right, and it's just
not
leaving
affecting
them
anything
vacant.
adversely building where they
Right.
want to
But
build.
it does for the landowner.
Such as how?
The person that had the plat done in, 14 or 15? Is that what you said? Now all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
but-
they've got restrictions.
They don't have any
No,
restrictions.
No, they don't.
Well, but I mean, they're having a no-build zone.
They don't
They
have
don't.
any.
No.
Not on there.
It terminates at the north
If-
property
Right at the
line of
property
this
line, it
subdivision.
Yeah.
If they replat that area, then we would ask for a similar no-build zone from them. But if they don't replat, if they leave it as is, there's no change to their usage. This is just the current plat that we're addressing.
Okay.
I'm just curious, do you know the history of the Cream Ridge subdivision, why there are two big lots? They have two kids, or, I mean,
I
that's
think
very.
Mr. Herring, did you do that?
Three kids. So,
So they like one more than the other?
survey, but
You
it
didn't?
does
Sorry.
make it split off the house, the small house. And while they did it, they just created two more big lots.
because, I mean, that's just not, just by looking at it, you can tell that's not a development
Right.
idea in mind.
But it was to sell the small house off.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're saying, we don't like that street lining up with, it's gonna mess up our future development, but that doesn't appear to be their intent, so.
In conference,
Sorry, Joe, I thought you
That's
did
okay.
that subdivision.
In conversation with the Crafts, I think they were more concerned with that road and limiting where they could build their house on that large lot too. And right now, there are no restrictions on where they can or cannot build a house. Of course, you don't want to see it right where a road may go, but there are no restrictions that stop them. And that's what they were concerned about with that road being placed where it was. And I was like, if you don't, told them my opinion, if you don't divide the property again and you just want to go build on lot 2, as long as you're outside the building setback line, you can build wherever you want on that property.
Right.
Well, if that North Street was to go through, it goes right to a pond. So I doubt they're going to build the house right
Right,
where
it
the
would-
street would go through.
You know, design
Anyway.
would curve it around and then end up somewhere up on the north road coming out of the high point, not at the 1320 line. And 1320 is not at the high point, it actually would be a dangerous intersection.
Yeah.
But, so that was one of their main concerns, being restricted where to build that house on that larger tract, and this doesn't restrict it.
Nobody's here
Thank you,
from
Joe.
that subdivision, is there?
Cream Ridge.
Okay. All right. Got any more questions of staff, or Mr. Herring, or legal? I'll entertain a motion.
So I make a motion, we approve case number DV 19061, final plat for Pride Estates with a waiver for streetlights. Sidewalks are already out, right?
Yeah, no.
Those are out.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second on waiving the streetlights and sidewalks at Pride Estates and approving the plat. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 All right.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
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 This is case number DEV 19055, the request for the renewal of a special use permit for Fletcher Financial, an insurance mergers and acquisition company. There has been a special use permit for this business on this location since 2009. This business occurs on the bottom level of the house. The top level of the house remains living space. There have been no complaints regarding this business. The company has 3 full-time employees, including the owner. There is no walk-up or retail traffic because the business is primarily conducted by telephone or internet. Traffic only includes the arrival and departure of the 3 employees every weekday, as well as occasional overnight letter package deliveries. An evacuation plan, fire extinguisher, and weather monitor are all on site. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this request, subject to conditions. Staff also recommends approval of this request. This is Resolution 2019-18. Thank you.
Okay, this requires a public hearing. I'll open up the public hearing portion. Is anyone here in favor of speaking for the Fletcher Financial?
I don't need to speak unless you need
No. Unless you would like to.
Unless you just want to.
All right. Anyone wishing to speak against the Fletcher Financial special use permit? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing and return to regular session. Any commissioner have any discussion on this?
Did we change the 10-year, what are we recommending?
It's 10 years.
Okay.
10 years, yeah.
Is that policy now? Did we get that changed yet? Or we
Uh,
just
no,
recommended
we
it?
just
Yeah, it's
recommending
just
it.
recommendation right now, but
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any other questions?
I just think it's really good that you're doing this. It really these are the kind of businesses that bring economic development into our county as much as any. And we want to encourage it. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah. So are you going to make a motion?
Sure, I move that we approve, let's see, it's, is this the DEV?
Resolution 2019-18.
Planning Commission, DEB 19-055 for approval, renewal of the special use permit for Fletcher Financial, Inc.
It's,
Can we do
it's
the
a
resolution
resolution, yeah,
same
just,
time?
Resolution.
you just do a motion to approve resolution 2019.
2019-18.
Yeah, the resolution 2009-18.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Stumbled through that one.
All right.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
No, I'm not the only one that's done that.
All right. Next case.
This is case number DEV 19056, a request for a special use permit for a child care facility. The applicant is proposing Life Learning Academy, a child care facility for school-aged children to learn life skills. This will be located in a current single-family residence at 22552 Honey Creek Road. The applicant is proposing up to 45 children and 3 employees. This will be located south of Life Preschool, also owned by the applicant, which operates at 16979 Chieftain Road. Life Learning Academy will be in operation 12 months out of the year, Monday through Friday, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. All children will be dropped off and picked up at Life Preschool at 16979 Chieftain Road and will be transported by van or via a walking path to the building at 22552 Honey Creek Road. There are 3 15-passenger vans which are shared with Life Preschool. The single-family residence is serviced by a lagoon, and the applicant is aware of the requirement for a licensed engineer to approve that the lagoon is sized correctly for the proposed amount of people. The applicant has expressed interest in possibly turning this child care facility into a private school in the future. At that time, the business will need to be reevaluated by the Planning and Zoning Department. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this request, subject to conditions. The Planning Commission recommended that the SUP be limited to a period of 9 years to align with the applicant's other special use permit. Staff also recommends approval of this business. This is Resolution 2019-19. Thank you.
And this requires a public hearing. I'll open up the public hearing portion for the Life Learning Academy. Anyone here wishing to speak in favor?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Gretchen Meitler. I live at 22730 Hatchell Road. Just want to speak on my behalf. There was one thing still in here that I brought up at the Planning and Zoning meeting as well in regards to the traffic impact fee that is proposed in here. So, I've already gone through this with my other location, of course. February 25th of 2019 on the county's Facebook page, they posted that we have heard some recent concerns about road improvement or RIF and the TIF, and we want to take a moment to address them. I'm going to skip over the RIF and go to the traffic impact fee is charged on all building permits for new structures on site, not remodeling, rehab, or other improvements to existing structures. Funds are placed in the Township's Improvement District Fund. Funds are used for collateral and arterial roads, for widening, paving, intersections, improvements, acquisitions, right-of-way engineering, and bridges. It goes on a little bit more in depth. So based off of what the county themselves has put out on social media in writing, I don't believe that the traffic impact fee should apply to the special use permit.
This isn't new construction.
No. There's no construction at all. We're moving into the main floor of a house and going to take kids over there to teach them life skills.
It's an extension to our other business, basically, correct?
Right.
Which she has a business on a state highway.
Right.
That I was already
That we
charged
charged.
Right.
$4,300 for a traffic impact fee.
Which I don't agree with. Collecting money on a state highway for traffic impact.
The traffic impact fee is collected for all special use permits because it increases the traffic on the roadways and has never been waived before.
Jeff, is there I don't know, but I assume some type of formula, right? I mean, so all you can do is go off 45 children, they're not of a driving age, so they're getting dropped off or maybe picked up via the van service that you provide. But, I mean, is there, at what point in time does it become significant enough or substantial enough to, you know, have that? I mean, that doesn't seem like that much to me, but again, not understanding what that formula looks like.
Sure. It's based on the numbers that the applicant gives us. They'll tell us, hey, we'll have this many vehicles coming in and going out. So it's based on that number of
So
trips.
it's daily, traffic, weekly,
It's number of
annualized,
trips
and then you guys
per
apply
day.
it.
Daily assumed trips.
How many daily?
But the difference is there's no more traffic than before. You're only taking them to a different piece
Different
of your
location.
parcel of property.
Correct.
But you're increasing the number of kiddos by 45, potentially.
So originally, when I put this together, we're looking into the future on
Okay.
possibly doing a private school.
Right.
So I wanted to encompass as much of what we might do in this initial one, because obviously it's very time-consuming for planning and zoning, for you as the commissioners, and me as the taxpayer. So I went the all-out.
Okay.
Right now, our approved, the health department came out yesterday for the final survey before all of this might be approved. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting on all those steps, because every step I take
Right.
is more fees and what have you on the backside. So they came out yesterday to start out with. We're going to be, they recommended approval for an immediate temporary license until the permanent license was in place for 24 kids.
Okay.
That 24 number is a good number for me right now because I have fewer requirements for monitored smoke detectors. And once you go past that number of 24, it blows up.
Right.
With the State Fire Marshal's Office, with the Health Department, KDHE, and so forth. So I tried to encompass the biggest picture I could when I submitted the application. Our license is going to be for 24 children.
Okay.
So when is it that you're thinking about expanding to a private school? Or would it be like a private school co-op, like homeschool? I know there's like homeschool co-op.
Right, so the homeschool co-ops reach out to me at the daycare on a regular basis. Can we come out? Can we use your facilities, your space? No, they really can't unless they're going to go and do all the paperwork that the state requires for me to have those children on
Right.
site and in our building, to include all of the volunteers or parents who might come onto my
Right.
property. Then I've got to do background checks and fingerprints, so on and so forth. Add them to my insurance policies for general liability, work comps, everything, even if they're just a volunteer coming in. So the idea with this potentially in the future, and you know, I've got 2 school-age children of my own. They're doing great in school. They love the social aspect of it. They're not quite as challenged as I personally, as a parent, want them to be. And there's not a lot I can do with that in public education. So my idea is, or goal, maybe dream, is to eventually have some type of, and the idea is until one of my current staff becomes a fully certified teacher through the state of Kansas, to utilize the K-12 online learning program, where then you only have to have like a proctor who oversees the children as they're taking their
Right.
classes online.
Are you guys a nonprofit organization or
In
what?
the event that we went to that, it would be yes.
And that-
Currently, we are for-profit.
And that's where it gets into us making a policy. We could, in a discussion at some future point, we could decide that a nonprofit educational institution could be exempted from the TIF, if that was our decision as a policy.
I hope she stays for-profit. I like the taxes.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
but
But,
just paid one last year.
I did, you
Now we're
know,
asking her to pay 2.
and hired legal counsel, and because, you know, much like this and the resolutions that are already in place, I'm on a state highway. The county does not provide water, sewer, anything to where we are. Now, in that one, it was proposed that we might build on that property and expand, because the current building that we're in, 16979 Chieftain, I can't make that any bigger. We're on well water. A well would not support a sprinkler system, so if I go over 99 children, I have to have an automatic sprinkler. Totally not cost-effective or conducive for us to do such a thing. So that's where we had said, hey, maybe we'll build. Well, looking at the requirements, the setbacks, the lagoon, the property line of our neighbors and what have you, we decided not to build. I still paid the traffic impact fee, even though we did not build. And then over the last few months, neighbors who we worked with throughout the last 2 special use permits for the preschool daycare, they came to us and said, hey, we're getting ready to retire, we're ready to move. I know you voiced interest in the past, are you still interested? So we took them up on it and we purchased their property to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood and the fact that we have property surrounding those 2 locations.
If we were to waive the traffic impact fee, what kind of a precedent would that set as far as other of these types of things that typically come up? I mean, how many of preschools, daycares, how many of those do you typically handle in a year?
Well, we collect the traffic impact fee on all the businesses that come into the county, so it's a standard fee.
Right.
We haven't waived it because the policy is there, so if you want to look at it, then we have to change the policy to make sure.
Well, what I'm asking is how many times do you think this would come up, a similar situation to her situation?
Not very much. It's.
How many special use permits do you issue in a year? Or how many are out there countywide right now? Hundreds, I would guess.
Yeah, there's more than 100.
More than 100,
Yeah.
but for like daycare?
It's very limited,
Very, very few, under 10?
I would say, yes.
Under 10. So if we did grant this, we would be making a precedent that wouldn't be
Well, I
affecting
think
very
you-
much.
I think you've got to remember that there's already been one that's been
Right,
paid.
that's what I
So
think.
that's the one we.
She's just
It was
explaining.
paid,
Right.
it was paid and contested. I
Right.
did
Okay.
hire legal counsel. There is a letter that was brought back after all of that was done, even though I paid kind of under protest, shall we say, until somebody reviewed it. So I do have that information in here and.
Is this the same parcel? Is this the same parcel as the other one?
No, sir.
So this is, it's a new location?
Right.
This one is,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
But you can see the location of
They're-
the existing.
right, they're
location.
adjacent.
It's adjacent.
Yeah.
And then my husband has the 22 acres behind it, which the fence is offset back there. That's where we have the walking path proposed. It's about a 9-minute walk from door to door for the kids.
So because it's a different parcel, that triggers the additional.
It's a new special use permit.
Right.
Would you contest the first one for?
I did,
I mean, what was the reason that you contested?
because same thing. The resolutions that are currently in place, I have to put that.
But I mean, you based it on a state highway, or you based it on that it was
Well,
a
based
building
it on a
already
state
there?
highway and just the reading of the resolution, Resolution 1991-34, and give me a minute here, I didn't think we'd get this deep into it, Resolution 2002-64.
But your point was there was already a house there? I mean,
Yeah, there was already a building
building.
on the,
She
we weren't
purchased
making
the
any.
church.
But you were
Yeah.
using it for a different purpose. And so you had to have the special use permit. And then I'm just saying, so along with this special use, for each special use permit comes the requirement for a TIF. Regardless, if I lived in, my question is, if I lived in my house out in the county, and then I'd already paid all my fees and everything, then one day I said, gee, I want to add a business
Then you're
to
gonna-
that, I would be assessed, I'd have to get a special use permit, correct?
Correct.
And then I would also be assessed a TIF.
Correct, that's based on the
Correct?
traffic.
I mean, that's
The-
just
the more
because I
traffic
might be
you're
increasing the
generating.
traffic on the road.
And I can
Okay.
appreciate the homework you did on the verbiage of, you're saying that there's already construction there, it's not new construction. But there's also, in the SUP regulation, it's a required TIF, so.
But if you read the original resolutions that pertain to the TIF and RIF for Leavenworth County,
But what's the SUP say? The regulations for an SUP?
That's for residences. I mean, just regular use. I mean, when you build a house and you move in, there's a TIF.
Correct, it's a standard fee, it's $820.70. But for the special use permit, it's calculated based on the traffic, the daily average traffic, so it's a different formula that we use.
But we could make a policy if we so chose that on a nonprofit like a Christian school or any kind of a school or nonprofit organization like a mental health facility, that we could waive that if we so chose. Is that right? Am I correct on that?
Do schools pay a traffic impact fee?
What?
No.
I don't think so.
Public schools wouldn't.
Public schools?
Not public
do?
schools,
Yeah.
but private schools.
Private schools do and public schools don't. But that's something we could change, right?
But if we were a private nonprofit,
But this is
then-
not a school.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Right.
Learning academy.
It's a learning, I mean, it's daycare. I consider it like a
This one
preschool.
in question today is a school-age program for children approximately ages grades 2 through 5 or 6. We're getting them into-
Pre-educational,
Right, we're bringing them
Early
into a
childhood development.
right, so
more home
we're,
environments.
it's not really fair that they're being charged if you look at policy and if we're exempting other kinds of schools.
You're not for profit.
I am for profit right now.
But we're not
If we do a
exempting
private
anyone.
school, we plan to go nonprofit for that, yes.
We're not requiring the schools to pay, Vicki.
But the taxpayers already pay for that.
I know. but-
Okay,
I'm just saying consistent. Anyway, it's something we could do, but I think right now unfortunately, I think you're on the hook for the $500 right now, the way the policy is.
500.
Or was it 589 or
589.29.
589.29? I mean, unless we did go to a policy change, the way I look at it.
But just to be clear, so the way that the business operates today, the way that you expect it to operate next week, I mean, your use within the multiple buildings and facilities, as it stands today, isn't necessarily changing. You're just forecasting that there could be growth down the road.
There could be.
Could be more students. There's a whole lot of could be.
A lot of
And I think the
variables.
fact that you've already spent nearly $5,000 on a road that we're not even responsible for is sufficient, in my opinion. But
I agree.
I tend to agree to an extent. I worry that I don't want anyone else to step up and say, well, we want to have ours waived too because we're changing the use of the property. I think that we have kind of a way of getting around that because it's just, you're shifting the group of kids from one location to another, so that's really not going to increase, at this point, the traffic.
No, I mean, it's a single-family home of 4 bedrooms. If you took a mother, a father, and 2 or 3 kids who are of driving age, you'd have more traffic in and out of there than what we do. Most of these kids will be dropped off in the afternoon in the after-school program by a school bus.
So,
A large portion of our kids ride the school bus to our location to minimize the traffic impact.
Right, so what I'm trying to get at is also, you were saying that if you decided at any point that you want to turn this into a school, a private school, whether it be, parochial or not, or, then you're going to, excuse me, come back for another special use permit. At that time, we can make a determination that says, no, there needs to be a traffic impact fee at that point because there will be increased,
Or could be, yes.
could be increased traffic flow. But right now, it doesn't appear that there is, that it's essentially, you've already paid for.
She's extending her business. That's
Right,
the existing
right.
business that she's
So
already paid for.
maybe the policy change would be setting a threshold before the TIF kicks in, so that all small businesses would benefit from it. Because I think, was it maybe a year and a half ago, we had a gentleman come in who runs a gunsmith shop out of his property.
Right, that's-
And he has like 3 or 4 or 5 people a month, maybe.
I
And
don't
he
even
had,
think he has that.
and he had to pay
A
a
TIF, that's
traffic
what I said.
impact fee. So maybe we set a threshold, because you got to be careful about exempting this regardless of profit or nonprofit, because there may be some organizations that come in that generate 2,500 to 3,000 cars a week.
right,
And
that would be another one
so
of those thresholds.
that's where I say,
Right.
maybe the
Yeah,
idea is
volume.
to set a threshold and say, anything less than this many cars per month, per year, whatever, anticipated traffic is exempt from the TIF. Anything over that then is on the TIF. So that would be the policy change. I think that would be applicable to all applicants then, so.
And maybe also if it's a road that we're responsible for.
Well, understand the traffic impact fee is not for the road in front of your house. It's for the roads within the township that you are conducting your business in. Because while the traffic coming into this business is coming off of a state highway, it had to get to that state highway probably via county roads. And that's what the TIF is for. It's for improvements of roads in the township that the business is in. Not necessarily for the road in front of your house, just like the road impact fees aren't for the road in front of your house, or business, excuse me. But that's what the TIF is for. So while, yes, this is on a state highway, that traffic has to get to that state highway somehow. And it's likely on county roads. So that's why we charge a TIF regardless of whether they're on a state highway or not. I think the idea here, though, is that the impact to small business, forget about the type of business,
Right.
profit or nonprofit, it's the size of the business. Now, a large manufacturing firm that comes into the county that generates thousands of trips a day, I believe we should retain the ability to charge them an impact fee. For a small business that probably isn't generating any additional traffic, because those same folks probably drive past that
Right.
place, taking their kids somewhere else if they're not stopping there.
If
Yeah,
her
either
business
go-
wasn't
So,
there, they'd be driving
it's-
on the roads too to take
So
it
that's,
somewhere
that's
else.
the threshold. So maybe what we could do as staff is come back with an amendment to the TIF policy with a threshold that's realistic to exempt most of the small businesses.
And I-
In the
Are you
industrial
in-
example you had, though, that's also a new construction case. I mean, so there's, again, an existing facility, like I get driven nuts when we'll use the TIF that was already paid, so I'll pick on a water district because I can at the moment. You know, a house gets repossessed, a house has already purchased a water meter, the water district decides to take said water meter back, and then the new person that buys the house is now responsible to buy a new water meter.
Right.
That sounds a lot like,
Legislature changed it.
But the usage of the property changes is what
changed it
generates
back.
the reevaluation
You
of
changed it
it.
back.
So it could be, that same piece of property, let's say what we're talking about, it could be a large warehouse that there's just storage in and there's very little traffic. But they go out of business and somebody comes in and puts in a manufacturing facility in that same building without changing the building, other than just bringing some equipment in, which is exempt from taxes, thank you a lot to the state government. But they do that, now they've changed the usage, so they have to get a new use permit. That's the trigger here, is the use permit. This is a special use permit or temporary use permit, whichever you want to go, but that's what triggers it. It's not the construction. The construction does not trigger this permit. It is the change in usage of the property. And so I think we could come up with an amendment to the policy that would set a threshold that would exempt smaller businesses from that. And I can work with the county counselor on that.
How much of a hurry
So
are
in
you
this
in to
case,
get this
then
done?
we would approve this, waiving the TIF pending the new policy?
Well, you would waive the TIF today. This wouldn't be pending anything.
Just outright
You would
waive
waive it
the TIF.
today. We would come back with a
knowing that we're
policy.
going to create a policy that would have addressed it before.
Would
it
have
got to
addressed it
us.
in anyways.
But
I like it.
But the first SUP TIF you paid was on this parcel?
It was
No.
on.
No,
No,
it's-
Jason.
This is a different parcel?
yes, different parcels.
Okay.
Different use, that's what triggers this requirement of this special use permit is, again, changing the usage of a parcel in the
So
county.
you want this TIF waived because it's
Because
same
we're-
business?
Same usage.
You,
Same business.
Expanding their business.
I'm expanding my
Just
business
moving
and
it
there's,
to
I
another-
mean, parents
it's-
are not dropping off or picking up at that location.
No,
The
no,
amount
no.
of vans that might go in or out,
but it's on a
is-
different parcel than the first TIF was paid.
correct. And the first TIF, I argued that one too.
Okay.
Have those
And
documents here.
And it's
because
adjacent parcel, right? Or down the road?
It's a little bit down the road,
They
yes.
still, the property
Same.
joins, correct?
There's a-
If you're
I-
gonna
we
have a
can-
walking trail
I
to
can
it.
see, if you stand and look out one window, you can see the other.
So there's going to be no increased traffic? Zero. So why would we charge you? That's where the policy should change.
This was calculated based off of the vans going from one property to another.
Okay.
That's what this was calculated off of, not of,
580 instead of 500.
yes. And that's why it's not
Based on
thousands of dollars.
45 kids, 3 employees.
Yep, 3 vans.
Well, I think developing this, obviously, I think government should do everything we can to promote your type
Encourage
of,
small
your
businesses.
type of organization.
And for me, I'm
And not stand in the way.
established, we have a lot of childcare providers in home within our communities that can't afford to go through all of this.
And I totally agree with that. How much is a regular SUP, like $4,000? Or,
No.
I mean,
It depends on
depends.
the amount of traffic.
Right.
Usually,
Just-
usually it's less than $1,000.
Okay.
But it's still a big chunk to a stay-at-home mom with a couple of kids who's
Right.
watching two or
But
three
it's,
other people's
but it has been
kids.
taken into account.
Yeah, we have special use permits with like $25 tip payment, so it depends on the amount of traffic.
Okay. It's not like we didn't take an account for it.
And I'm not saying that. I would like everybody to be aware of what's been put in writing on social media, in 2 different resolutions prior to that social media post. And just to have an understanding of how hard it is, in my personal opinion, in Leavenworth County, to do what's right, to start a small business and encourage growth and development within our communities.
But I think, Jeff, I mean, you're arguing the current policy, and I think what we've just established, at least from a small business perspective, is if you don't generate adequate traffic, we're going to set a threshold to where this is probably not considered in the future.
But do we need to figure out what that threshold is going to be before we were to waive an impact fee for, I mean, no offense, I'm just, but I think that we need to determine what is that threshold before we waive a fee. Because I just, how big of a hurry are you in?
Yesterday.
Yes.
No, back in May, because,
Okay.
I mean, we had a hiccup here where I couldn't even submit for my packet because we were in the process of purchasing it. The sellers weren't comfortable with the way the owner authorization form was worded, so they wouldn't sign that, and I had to wait till closing, so we bumped up closing, but that was still almost 30 days past. I missed the cutoff,
So hurry.
so
Could we approve it pending the new TIF policy? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, if I could offer a suggestion. If you were to waive the traffic impact fee in this specific case, I do not believe that would count as precedent for, or binding you on future considerations. This case has certain unique aspects, as every special use permit has. In this case, it's the expansion of an existing business. It's a business that's on a state highway. It's business that's previously paid a traffic impact fee. Those are all unique considerations, or considerations that are unique to this property. So if you were to waive it today, I don't believe you're opening the barn door and the horses are going to run out. That being said, if you charge your staff with reviewing the traffic impact fee collection process, the issue that Mr. LOUGHRY raised, that a threshold can be fully looked at by your staff and brought back to you. The traffic impact fee isn't some arbitrary number fished out of the air. There's a formula for it. Your staff applies it. That's why some are $25, some are $2,500. I think the issue might be a cost-benefit analysis to the county as to the administrative cost of imposing a traffic impact fee for very small uses, as well as the economic disincentive that may offer. But to look at this case this morning, I do not believe if you were to consider waiving it that you would be binding yourself from any future action, particularly since you pronounced an intent to study it and possibly amend that policy in the future.
You were here as recent as 2018?
I believe it was 2017.
Okay.
November, December 2017.
Okay. It was almost 18.
Yeah, so January 30th of 2018 was the date on the letter from the legal counsel that I saw in regards to protesting that traffic impact fee on the other location.
You remember how much that was, the TIF on the other one?
4,300.
It was $4,272.32.
The
Plus
TIF, the TIF itself.
Yeah, plus legal fees. But it, you know,
Did you bring that to the Board of Commissioners?
Yeah.
And what the decision was?
they said,
I
too
got
bad,
out
you're
of it.
paying it, they cashed my check.
I
So,
voted against it.
You did, yes.
well, I mean, I guess we can't revisit that, but,
No.
but I'm prepared to make a motion to and approve this with the exclusion of the TIF fees, if you're ready.
I think you're still in the public hearing, so.
I mean,
Oh,
yeah, we're in public
okay.
hearing right now.
Sorry.
But
Does anybody have any other
I
questions?
don't.
I want to encourage more small daycares in Tonganoxie area. I am the only center.
You are,
The
and
only
you provide a
center-
very valuable service to the
Little
people in that
Angels is
area.
closed, we had one just recently closed here in Lansing, so I get that trickle-down effect back to us in Tonganoxie, which is why I keep coming back and trying to come up with new things.
Christian Church still has, don't they? The Christian Church still has.
Yes, they do,
theirs.
but they too have downsized in their program and what they're offering,
Yeah,
so.
well, I think, definitely we want
And
to
if I can
encourage
find a
Christian
commercial
schools
building,
and
I'd
Christian
love to do it.
daycares.
But right now, there's nothing out there as far as commercial buildings go. We did actively pursue purchasing Little Angels to try and make a difference there, but, with what they wanted for the purchase price of the building and the business, even though it had closed prior to us looking at it, it wasn't
Didn't work.
conducive.
Right.
And I like to, if I'm going to be an owner of a business, I want to be close and be active in that business to ensure that everything's done to my standards.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, and your latest thing, I consider it early childhood development.
Right,
you know.
that's what
So
I agree.
I think you're very valuable to the community.
Thank you.
I think the uniquenesses that Mr. Van Paris laid out for us, make this an easier waiving.
So, okay, well, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of this special use permit? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing and return to regular session, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve Resolution 2019-19, a special use permit for Life Learning Academy, subject to all conditions, less the TIF fee.
And that would be resolution.
Resolution 2019-19.
It is.
Have a motion and a second? Or
Second.
have a second? Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just think this is an example of where government can either get in the way or government can get out of the way of helping these type of businesses to prosper. I mean, if you set the fees so high, then a small daycare a lot of times can just be knocked out of the water. If you charge them $5,000, where I think this policy that we're talking about of setting
I don't
a
think
minimum threshold
Yeah.
is a great thing that I think we should pursue that.
Well, I just think the business is providing an excellent service for families, parents, so they can go to work, pay their
Right.
taxes.
Mr. Lofty, I'm assuming we'll have that on a work session.
That's what I was going to bring up, because I'm for everything you're saying, but we've again tied the hands of staff, and we're going to go against staff recommendation because of the black and white rules that they have to go by. So
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying and
that's my
doing, but I'm saying
We gotta fix it.
they lowered they've adjusted the TIF down accordingly. So we took into consideration, how much the TIF was. So that's all I'm saying, is we need to address policy if we're going to keep doing this, because you're going to open the door and everybody's going to be walking in asking for the same thing if you're not careful.
And planning and zoning, our meeting with planning and zoning has been shoved back into August, is that correct? Or moved back into August?
Yeah, we're working on a schedule for August. There are some challenges with availability so far. There's only been one day that's come up, and I don't know whether or not that'll work, but if it will, that's what we're going to try to schedule for.
I think that's where our policy comes in.
County fairs, 29th through the 3rd or so, 4th. That
But I
would be
agree.
good.
I agree with Commissioner Colbert. I mean, I really feel for the whole situation, but it's not based, to me, what I'm hearing is it's based on the number of projected individual vehicles that will use that specific road. And if it's a new road that's going to be used as a drop-off place, then I think that looking at what different uses are, that it's a small business versus a large corporation or whatever, maybe we need to begin to look at how we set thresholds or what we do. But right now, our staff,
What makes this one tough is it's a different parcel. It's not
Yeah.
the same parcel.
But,
Replat it.
yeah, replat it.
That will get around it.
Combine it.
I think we got to.
and I agree when we have early childhood.
Okay. Any further discussion? Then voting?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Nay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Down at that piece, Jeff, I agree with everything you just said. I think staff does an amazing job. Planning and zoning, everybody's working within the
Right.
policy. Our job is to
Right.
figure out if we're working within the best possible policy and make improvements when and where we can. Unfortunately, if somebody, there is generally speaking, you don't know about an error or an opportunity in a policy until it's presented. So you can either go with what you believe to be wrong and then try to fix it after the fact, or
Exactly.
make a decision on the fly and then make sure you have a work session to address it.
And I'm confident that after the work session, and we bring this particular item up, we would all be unanimously on the same page.
And you'll
But
probably never
we're not
have
there right
another-
now.
You'll probably never have another business that
Could be.
just
Well, I
paid
hope we
an
have lots of
SU,
other
just paid a
businesses
traffic
that-
impact fee and then expanded to the next property
Well,
too.
Vicky, if the K through 12 performance doesn't get any better, I sure hope we do too.
I mean, I really do. But it's, to me, it's kind of like what I said earlier. You know,
Right.
you live with what it is that we have that exists. And if it isn't working, then you fix it. You don't look back and say, well, that's the way we always did it.
I agree with
But
that.
we have to be willing to change and make those adjustments as they come down, and we recognize that they're there. And as, in this case, you know, I feel like, you know, support staff because they've made a recommendation that is based on policy. That's kind of where I am, and I'm not sure how I would have voted if it had been,
Yeah.
Well, the three
Well,
of you had already
this
said.
is a unique situation.
It is.
I mean, this person purchased a church and, which wasn't paying any taxes, to put it on the tax rolls.
Which is a good thing. I mean, that's what I said.
And it's providing a good service for the community, because like I said, there's all these places are closing and her business is growing because of
And it's amazing, and I'm all about early childhood.
And I am too. So anyway, so that being said, I want to remind everybody that the county appraiser's office will be in Linwood on July 8th and 9th, 1 to 7, to come down there with your damage assessments or get your stuff off the tax roll. And let's see, Baser's fireworks tomorrow night at the high school, and the 4th of July parade at 7:30. And I believe there's food trucks and everything at 5:30. It's always a good event. Weather will cooperate. And let's see, I went to Baser City Council last week, so that's pretty much all I've done. You got anything important?
Well, the breakfast with the Commerce Secretary has been changed to September 19th.
The
instead of the
19th of
12th.
September. Okay.
And there'll be a breakfast in Tonganoxie, and then he'll be touring the industrial sites and the prison, I guess. And I don't know how much of that we're invited to attend or not, but he'll be also wanting to meet with the county commissioners.
Okay. Well, we got the time schedule stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, I just letting you know that date
Okay.
changed from the 12th to the 19th. I guess he's out of state on the 12th
Okay.
of September.
You can read that, or am I?
Got any exciting news, Mr. Kennedy? Attend the Lansing fireworks?
As far as exciting news, so city council meeting last week, I did visit that institute, or I did go to the Institute of World Politics meeting. It was very informative to find out what this particular institute, college, school in Washington is doing to better equip the leaders, regardless of party, regardless of military affiliation, but international business and negotiation and propaganda. It was interesting, we'll say the least, but informative nonetheless. So I'd be excited to hear back on your guys' trip to Washington and what overlap might exist, or how many people you talk to can benefit from said institute. So.
You guys just all need to sit and, for us, work out some of the questions you might want to have asked, or issues you might want to have addressed or looked into, or whatever. I think we need to.
I already got a list.
That's why I said I need your list, and I think that
Okay.
that's something we need to.
Okay. You have anything exciting going on?
Not until next week.
Did you go to the fireworks?
No, I didn't.
I'm sure Mr. Van Paris did.
On my back deck.
There was no city commission meeting.
City
last
didn't have a
night,
meeting
so-
last night.
Okay.
But we-
Oh,
Town hall meeting
holiday
Monday.
week, yeah. Oh, yeah. we went to
Town hall Monday night.
Correct.
Town hall.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
All right, so we got anything else?
We have a motion?
We have an
We have a
executive
request
session?
for,
Yeah.
yes.
I move that the board recess for a closed executive meeting for the discussion of potential litigation as justified by KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with legal counsel for the board, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client privilege relationship, and that the board resume open meeting at
11:15.
11:15 a.m. in the meeting room of the board. Present in the executive meeting will be Commissioners Culberson, KAAZ, Shimke, Smith, and STIEBEN. County Senior Counselor David Van Paris, County Administrator Mark LOUGHRY, and County Engineer Mike Spickelmeyer.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the executive session? Seeing none, voting?
Aye.
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 Let the record show we return to regular session, executive session. No decisions were made and limited discussion limited to pending legal.
Okay.
So,
I move that the board recess into a closed executive meeting for the continued discussion of potential litigation as justified by KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with legal counsel for the board, which would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship, and that board resume open meeting at,
30.
I think that's enough time this time?
35? 30?
Should be.
Okay.
At 11:30 a.m. in the meeting room of the board. Present in the executive meeting will be Commissioners Culberson, KAAZ, Shimke, Smith, and STIEBEN, Senior County Counselor David Van Paris, County Administrator Mark LOUGHRY, and County Engineer Mike Spickelmeyer.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the executive session? Seeing none, voting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show we returned to regular session. Discussion was limited to consultation with legal counsel. No decisions were made. Any further business for us? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.